Let's talk about some key players to watch in this next preseason game against the Cardinals, including a running back that might be getting the nod over Deneric Prince. Look at some highlights from the final camp practice yesterday, as well as take a look at an injury from a key defensive back that has stayed somewhat under the radar in the midst of the Chris Jones holdout. But first, how about those? Well, we did it, ladies and gentlemen. Training camp is officially over, with the last practice being yesterday, a practice that was earlier than normal, as well as a lighter practice. And you could see a couple of unique plays being worked on out there, including a jet sweep ran by Richie James. Mahomes then faked a pitch to the right on this play and hit Pacheco on the opposite side via a screen pass. Patrick also linked up with Kelce running across the middle of the field on a play action pass. And Justyn Ross could even be seen scoring a wide open touchdown here on this play after a very incredible effort by Khalif Halassi close by in coverage. All right, just kidding. It was merely a walkthrough, no issues there, so let's move on. But before we do, I want to give a shout out to KC Sports Network, who has been holding it down and providing some awesome training camp footage all throughout camp. Shout out to them. Make sure to follow them on Twitter. They report on all kinds of teams, college and professional, from the Kansas City area, as well as a ton of Chiefs coverage on their YouTube channel and across all their social medias. Next up, Big Red spoke to the media at the conclusion of camp, saying he was happy with camp overall. A nice foundation was built and things have been accomplished here that they will then carry on with them through the rest of the season. Mahomes said the team has improved on a lot of stuff. The new receivers are flying around now, and there's even been improvements from the second-year guys. The O-line did a great job battling through camp, and he enjoyed going against the DBs as Spags tested them and moved them around everywhere. It was a competitive camp, and that's exactly what you want, with both sides competing and winning at times, losing at others. Next up, the injury report for the last day of camp was the same as Wednesday's, but here's a refresher, and I would also assume most of the players on this list will also not be playing in Saturday's game against the Cardinals, though I haven't seen a final injury report as of when I recorded this video on Friday, but here we go. First up, Isiah Pacheco did practice, yes, but he will probably not play in this game considering he's still limited out there in that yellow "Do Not Touch Me" jersey. For the players who didn't practice at all, though, first up was offensive lineman Nick Allegretti, who injured his shoulder on Wednesday's practice, leaving early, and was spotted on the sideline in a hat and jersey on Thursday. Wide receiver Kakoa Crawford also didn't practice, though I don't believe a reason was mentioned. Cornerback Nick Jones fractured a couple fingers in his hand in the first preseason game and is going to be out for a little bit. Wide receiver Nico Remigio, I hate this one, dislocated his shoulder earlier this week and could be out for a little while or a long while. Time will tell, but I was rooting for the guy as his stock continued to climb throughout camp. And then 3 players are dealing with knee issues, with those being wide receiver Kadarius Toney, who had minor knee surgery after hurting it the first day of camp. Defensive tackle Turk Wharton re-aggravated his knee again recently in some capacity after just coming off the PUP list, and so they are easing off on him for now. I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but it's got to be a little discouraging for him after rehabbing back from that torn ACL last season. And then cornerback L'Jarius Sneed also once again didn't participate in the last day of camp and hasn't practiced since July 31st. That's coming up on 3 weeks of no practice for Sneed, and while the focus of the masses has remained on Chris Jones and his holdout, which is a big deal and is still ongoing, I've also been concerned about Sneed and his knee for a little while now. He popped up on the injury report back before the divisional round against the Jags, and while he was listed as a full participant, his knee was still the cause for him popping up on that injury report. And then he popped up on it again Thursday just prior to the Super Bowl as a limited participant due to his knee. So yeah, we might indeed have something going on with that knee, as it still continues to bother him. He missed out on a portion of OTAs, didn't participate in the team's mandatory minicamp, and again has sat out for the majority of training camp. So the question is, will Sneed be okay for this season? Well, I certainly hope so, but this knee issue has been a problem for him in some capacity since January of this year, and that's 7 months now. And with the season quickly approaching, I am growing a bit concerned here. Now, do I think he's going to be on IR and sit the season out or anything like that? I don't think so, because if he needed knee surgery, they probably, I think, would have done it months ago. So I'm not really worried about that, but I am worried about his ability to play through 17 games and endure through all of that, all things considered. I mean, Andy Reid made it seem like he's going to be good for the season, but he's also continued to say for nearly 2 months now they are backing off on Sneed's knee due to swelling and inflammation. They backed off at it at times during OTAs, mandatory minicamp, then he was back out there at training camp. and they had to back off the knee once again. And here's why this concerns me a bit. Defensive backs coach Dave Merritt recently spoke to the media, and when asked about why he's been rotating Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson in and out with the ones so frequently, he basically said it was because he needs both of them to show more consistency and needs for one of them to step up as the clear starter. So early on here, prior to the start of the season, we have question marks about the consistency in the cornerback room for two players heading into year two. And on top of that, Sneed is also an element of the question mark surrounding the room overall, because if Sneed is unable to stay healthy and out on the field on a regular basis, that also makes Sneed himself inconsistent, albeit due to injury and not his on the field performance. But the best kind of a football player is one that's available, and Sneed is a very important key to the defense when out on the field. A Swiss Army knife type of player for them, a leader and one of the most experienced vets in the secondary. He played a lot of snaps last year all over the place and was graded out as the 5th best corner via his pass rush grade per PFF, recording 18 pressures, 13 QB hurries, 4 sacks, and 2 batted down passes. He was also the 12th highest graded corner overall on defense, snagging 3 INTs. And man, while Chris Jones is the centerpiece of the defense, and I hope a deal or the holdout ends here soon, Sneed is pretty high up there on the list of importance on the defensive side of the ball. In fact, I'd love to get your thoughts on the Sneed situation. Does his repeated knee flare-ups also concern you guys, or do you think the Chiefs are simply being ultra cautious here to save him for the regular season, and it's probably not that big of a deal? Let me know your thoughts either way in the comments down below. Something else I gotta let you know about is a few ways you can support the channel and the HBTC movement. I don't know, I just made that term up. You could become a member. We have a members only Discord and do monthly members streams giving away jerseys and signed memorabilia. The middle tier gives you access to a members only Zoom call. And then the third tier gets you a shout out. So shout out to the fellow red bearded legends out there. You can also order some of my coffee of Benchwarmer Brew, a smooth medium roast that people have been saying is
they're nice.
And I have all those links in the description down below. Now, as far as tomorrow's game goes against the Cardinals, Andy Reid said the ones will go for a half, then he's going to mix in the 2s and 3s in the 3rd and 4th quarter. They may pull some people out earlier than the end of the first half though, so he basically said, don't hold me to exactly that all across the board. Quote, if I pull guys out early, it's just something I feel at that time. Injuries are a part of the game, yes, but preseason is a step up from practice, and Big Red wants to see these guys as ready as they can be for week 1. He also wants to see increased execution this go round against the Cardinals, especially with the first team offense and defense. They aren't game planning against them or anything special like that, but the team now has a rep under their belt and the goal is to keep at it. All right, a couple things here. Mahomes played 2 full series last year for preseason game number 2, which was definitely less than a half, and considering they were playing on that god-awful field that took out Trent McDuffie and Harrison Butker week 1 for roughly half the season last year, I am a fan of Mahomes playing as little as possible out there personally, but I do understand he needs to get some rapport with the first team offense. But speaking of Patrick, he said the goal for Saturday is to have better energy and better urgency from the get-go on both sides of the ball. It's not about a preseason victory per se. After all, this is merely a televised scrimmage, but he's about continuing the winning culture and mentality that the Chiefs have had, especially in recent years. He then noted that every week they're going to get each team's best, and with the Super Bowl of last year in the rearview mirror, the mindset is to stay focused no matter who it is, or they could get beat, especially with how tough the division is and the AFC overall. And a couple players that I personally am looking forward to watching out there in tomorrow's game is going to be running back Perine, who has, in some people's eyes, surpassed Deneric Prince for that RB4 spot, at least at the moment. And the reasoning for that is partially due to how each back performed in preseason game 1, but also due to the fact that this week during 9-on-7 at practice, Prince was the 5th running back to get carries when he was previously the 2nd or 3rd prior to preseason game number 1. But this week, it was actually the 4th-year veteran Perine getting carries immediately following CEH and McKinnon. Remember also, though, that Pacheco is still limited in practice, so he wasn't involved in this portion of practice, but it's definitely an interesting development. I personally need to see more out of both of these guys, Perine and Deneric Prince, before removing Prince from my 53-man roster as RB4. But one way he could actually fall out of favor is if wide receiver Richie James earns the nod as not only the team's punt returner, but also the kick returner. If that actually happens, I'm not sure, but Tobe mentioned this week he wanted to see both Prince and Richie James get more reps in, so that's definitely something to keep a lookout for. I also want to see some of these young DBs get more work in to see how they perform, especially with Sneed out, Nick Jones out, and Jalen Watson and Josh Williams repeatedly battling through consistency issues, and that's not to mention Nazeeh Johnson being placed on IR for tearing his ACL. The question is, what do some of these players that showed out at times last game have in the tank for this upcoming game? Players like Khalif the Thief Halassi, Echo Boydo, as well as defensive back Lamar Jackson, who was actually the highest graded defensive player in Week 1's preseason game. I also want to continue watching the defensive line and look for any standouts possible, considering Chris Jones won't be out there, Turk Wharton is still working back from injury, and currently suffering a setback, and Charles Omenihu will be suspended for the first 6 games of the regular season. So, who will it be? Can FAU continue progressing? What about the other newly drafted guys in BJ Thompson and Keandre Coburn? Hopefully, some of these depth pieces will continue to climb and impress. And then with wide receiver Nico Remigio out due to injury, I want to see some of these other receivers and who will step up. Players that showed flashes last game, like Kakoa Crawford. If he ends up playing, he was listed as somebody who didn't practice last training camp on Thursday. Cornell Powell is another one, as well as Ty Freifogel. But this is more so to see the depth and how that could look, as most of these guys will more than likely, if the Chiefs are high enough on them, end up on the practice squad if they don't get claimed off of waivers. I'm also excited to see some more action, obviously, from Justyn Ross, and I'm curious to see if he's going to get some work in there with Mahomes under center. Last game, Ross wasn't out there until the 3rd drive, with the 4 receivers that were out there for the first 2 drives being Justin Watson, Skyy Moore, MVS, and Rashee Rice. I'll also be curious to see if Richie James gets worked in a bit with Mahomes as well, considering he had a great performance last week. And with all that being said, who are some of the players you are most intrigued to keep your pupils on and watch in Saturday's matchup against the Cardinals? Let me know in the comments down below, and come through to the live stream if you want to hang out during the game. I'll be streaming and calling/reacting to the entire game. And until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those